First, we will take a look at the fixed assets setup so you have a better idea of the structure of the module. And the first one I'm going to take a look at is the calendar. Calendar setup, most likely you're going to be building the calendar off of your existing fiscal calendar. You do have the option of increasing or decreasing your depreciation amount for short and long years. And while it's not a requirement to set up quarters, some of the functionality within GP does require quarters to be configured. The next setup that is unusually a window all on its own is the purchasing posting account. This is where you tell the fixed asset module which GL account to watch for posted transactions that will end up as assets. So you simply configure your fixed asset clearing account here. You can set up different accounts for different asset classes, although that is not a common setup. The next two windows are closely tied together. They are the account group and class setup. In account group, you choose your account group ID, description for it, and then choose your accounts for all purposes in that account group. The ones that you really need to watch out for are going to be your depreciation expense, your depreciation reserve or accumulated depreciation, the asset cost, and your clearing account. Less commonly used but still important are going to be your gain loss accounts and proceeds. The prior year depreciation account is going to be used in situation where you recalculate an asset into a prior year. So if you're going from the start of life of an asset that was added in prior years. Once you have an account group created for each class of assets, you'll want to set up the classes themselves. In this case, you have a class set up, the account group that is attached to it. You can also configure an insurance class on it. You can also set up a default class ID. So when you add a new auto class asset, it will pull an asset ID automatically as configured here. And as you add new assets, this will increment appropriately. In the book and book class setup, we will begin to see the setup of the depreciation methodology. When you define a book, you can have more than one. In the test company, we have 3. You will have to choose one of them as your corporate book, which will post to the GL. The setup just involves selecting your book, selecting the calendar that it will run on, the current fiscal year for it, and the depreciation period, whether it's going to be periodic or on a daily basis. When you do a year-end close within the fixed asset module, this current fiscal year will increment. The book class setup is where we actually predefine the default depreciation method for your assets. You select a book, you select a class, and set up your depreciation method, averaging convention, and as appropriate, years and other options within the depreciation method. It is highly recommended that you read the fixed asset manual before choosing these depreciation methods yourself. Some of them will not work the way that you expected. So it's good to know beforehand what you will be getting when you select, for example, an amortization type. The averaging conventions are also good to review before doing a setup. Again, these are going to be important to understand how it works both during the initial year of addition as well as the year that the asset is retired. Finally, we will take a look at the company setup. This sort of ties the rest of the setup together. And here's where you will be forced to select your corporate book, which posts to the GL. The other important option in here are the purchasing options. This is how you set up how the integration from payables or the purchasing module will come through. You can set it up for just the payables invoicing, but you can also pull in through purchase order processing by an account in there or by a receipt line. You do have to select default accounts for the module as a whole. If you add an asset that doesn't belong in a class or the class is missing an account group set up on it, this will automatically fill in these accounts on that asset. From here, you can also get to the user-defined field setup. This is a set of 15 fields where you can define names on them, select the format for them. Some of the fields can be set up as a validated list or a validated date as well. With that configuration complete, you can very quickly assign default accounts, default depreciation methodology to any new asset addition within a book. It can make the addition of new assets very quick indeed, taking literally a couple clicks and a couple seconds, and you are done. Next, we will be looking at common routines. These are typically the things you're going to be doing on a month-to-month basis. First, we'll look at the depreciation routine. In this routine, you can either run it for all assets, or you can define a group of assets, run it on a group of assets, or alternatively, there is this depreciate one asset window, where you're looking to just do a single asset at a time. The depreciation process does have the option here, reverse depreciation. So if you have already calculated depreciation on your assets, but there was an error, you can run the reverse depreciation. This is good in that it keeps history of both the original and the reversal in your transactional history. You'll be able to see both the initial depreciation transaction for the reversal of that depreciation, and then presumably another entry for the redepreciation of the asset. When you are depreciating, you select your target date, select your books. You can select multiple, and click depreciate. As it calculates, you'll see this green bar at the bottom fill up. Once that completes, the bar is full, and we should see this come back to being a depreciate button. Just like that. Now all assets, as I was depreciating on all assets in both of the two books that I added, will be calculated to the end of December 2027. Now that we have calculated some depreciation transactions on our fixed assets, we will want to post them through to the general ledger. For that, we use our GL posting routine. Note that this routine doesn't actually post through the GL. What it does is create the GL batch that you will need to post yourself. You'll be assigned a batch ID based on existing batches that have been run. You select your posting date. You can add a reference such as April depreciation, and then select your restrictions for the batch. Typically I'll leave it as blank for the beginning period. That just means it's going to find any fixed asset transactions from the start of time to the selected period. Click Insert to add a restriction. And you can add multiple restrictions. For example, you might want to limit it to only posting depreciation or additions or retirements, so on and so forth. And you can select specific assets or classes too. Once you have your restrictions in place, click Process. This searches through all of your fixed asset transactions for transactions that have not been posted through to a GL batch and that fit within the restrictions that you've added. In this case, we can see we have a number of old transactions in here for additions. As well as our depreciation that we've calculated through in the current year. If you want to review this batch at a later date, you can save them. When you save a batch, you see it increments the next batch ID, but your batch that you have saved is available behind the lookup by the batch ID. Just select your previous batch, and it will fill in with all of these selected transactions. When you are ready to post, it's just this post button here. I'm going to ignore these reports. You see the green bar that completes at the end there. Once that's done, you can close this window, go into our financial batches, and look up our FA transaction batch. Here you can again review it and post it through to the GL. Next up, we will take a look at depreciation projections. This is also a routine that can be run. What it's going to do for you is allow you to see your projected depreciation expense in upcoming periods without having to actually run the depreciation routine, calculate those amounts, and save them on the assets as a transaction. Much like depreciation, you can run the projection for all assets or unselect that box and set a group of assets to run it against. I will do it against all assets. Set your target date. You can select multiple books. In my case, I will just run on the internal, the corporate book. And click the projection button. You'll get the prompt, are you sure you wish to continue? Click OK. We have our progress bar across the bottom here. As it fills up and completes, once it is finished, we should see this projection button light back up once it is finished calculating. Like so. Once the calculation is complete, how do we see that data? In this case, we're going to be going into fixed asset inquiry, projections inquiry. We will most likely have an error pop up here that is just related to the data in the Fabricam company in our test environment. So select your asset, select a book, and here's the error, just letting me know that there is a duplicate projection for this, presumably for the SA user here. Select the year it's going to look at. This will only display depreciation that hasn't actually been calculated, where it hasn't been run through the depreciation routine. So you see we have depreciation calculated for 2028 through all 12 periods, but we don't see anything in 2027, not all of which is posted, but has been calculated when we ran the depreciation routine. You can scroll through all of your assets this way as well, and look at them one by one. Alternatively, there are projection reports where you can look at the projection, annual projections or periodic projections in detail and summary. In that case, you'll get a report that shows all of the assets based on restrictions that you have set. Moving on from routines, we will take a look at the asset cards themselves, starting on the general asset card. I just use these buttons in the bottom left-hand corner to scroll to the last asset in the list. You can see recorded here, you're going to have the asset class, the asset ID, description of it, some categorization, acquisition date. It is important to note that the acquisition date is not necessarily the place in service date. We will see that on the next card, the book card. The acquisition date is simply when the asset was purchased, not necessarily when it was actually placed in service and depreciation begins. The acquisition cost has a blue detail arrow, which allows you to drill in for more information. If you have added costs to this asset from integration through payables, you will be able to drill back on that information from these records. As you can see, you can also have multiple additions to an asset, and you can track them separately here to see the individual purchases that make up the full asset cost. There's an additional, a large number of default non-accounting data that can be attached to each asset, such as locations, physical locations, building and room number, labels on it, structure if you're in a department, if it's sales versus admin. If you have HR module functional, you can select employees based on that module. In this case, I've chosen Randall Bozeman. If you've ever done any setup within Fabricam for payroll, that's kind of the default employee. And manufacturer. Behind this arrow, we should see serial number, model number, warranty date. So there's a lot of information that can't be stored on asset. In most cases, it doesn't often get used. Usually there'll be one or two fields that our clients care about. And because this is non-accounting data, you can absolutely repurpose many of these fields to be used as something else. If it gets confusing, you can also modify this window to relabel some of these fields. At the top here, you see this purchases drop down. There should be one asset in here. We will take a look at that soon. This is used to add additional assets through the purchases module. One of the convenient things about the fixed asset module is this go-to menu up at the top. It gives you a shortcut to the other cards related to that asset. So as you can see, it also has check marks beside cards that actually have information on them. So in this case, we are on the general card. We'll take a look at the account card. This will give you a list of the depreciation accounts set up on this specific asset. One of the interesting things about the module is that you'll see, despite the fact that this was added using a pre-configured account group, there is an account group set up either on the account card or on the general card here, where you can see there's also an account group ID. When the asset is set up, that account group ID fills in all of these accounts based off of the accounts set in the account group. However, on the asset itself, each account is stored separately. The effect of this is that if you do later change account group setup, it is not going to roll down to the individual assets. You'll have to transfer the assets to appropriate accounts separately. So once more, changing the account group setup will not roll down to the individual assets after the assets have already been added. Next, we're going to look at the asset book data. You select our book that we're looking at. In this case, we'll take internal. And here's going to be the depreciation information and the depreciation sensitive fields for the asset. We have our place in service date, which is, again, is not necessarily the same as the acquisition date on the general card. This is going to be the date that's used to calculate the start of depreciation. We have a depreciated to date, and this is going to change based off of the depreciation routine that has been run against the asset. We have run ours through to the end of December in 2027, and so we see our depreciated to date matching that. Cost basis is the cost basis of the asset for the purpose of depreciation. You can see the calculated annual depreciation rate for the asset. Current depreciation just states the most recently calculated depreciation on that asset. And you can also see your year-to-date, life-to-date, and total net book value. You can also see the depreciation method, averaging convention, and in this case, because we have straight line original life, the original life of the asset, and remaining life of the asset. You can also note in all of these cards this go-to menu exists, and you can switch between them based off of that. We have insurance and lease cards as well. Nothing set up within this test company, but as you can see, it just allows you to define some insurance values on the asset or some lease values with the lease company, the contract, interest rate, so on and so forth. Finally, we will look at the user data card. This is the user-defined fields that are configured in the company setup. Let's put our newfound knowledge to the test now and actually do an asset addition pulled in through the payables transactions. Going to go into payables transaction entry. Add a description for the asset. Choose your vendor. Select your purchase amount. In the transactions distributions, we need to change this purchase account to the fixed asset clearing account, which we set up as being $15.90. Assuming this is all the information that we need for the transaction, we're just going to post this through. Yeah, I'm not interested in the reports in payables for our purposes today. Once that is posted through payables, we need to go back into our fixed asset general card. When we take a look at this purchases drop down, we now have a second entry in here. Previously we just had the $12,000 asset. Now we can see the $1,200 laptop that I just added. Select that purchase. You can see the description pulls in from the description that was set on the payables transaction. Select the class for the asset. In this case, that class has a asset ID set to pull in from that automatically. It assigns that asset ID for us. And it also assigns our account group for us. If we look at the acquisition cost, we can see it linked through to our originating vendor, as well as the specific voucher that it was posted on. And we can drill through to that invoice. Save to save the general information. Then we just need to hop over to the book information. Select our book. The depreciation information files in automatically from the book class setup because we chose the comp class and we chose the internal book. This is the depreciation method for that configuration. All we have to do is save. If you need to add additional information such as user data, insurance, lease, that sort of thing, you can do so. And you can also double check on the account and make sure these are configured as expected into computer equipment. That is how quick it actually is to process through from payables into the fixed asset module. Once more, just to show how quick that actually is once the purchase has been posted in the purchasing module. Bring up your asset general card, select the purchase. Select your class, save, go to your book information, select your book, save, and you're done. Continuing the theme of how quick and easy fixed asset module can be for processing, let's go back into our routines. We have a new asset that has just been added, so let's run depreciation on it. I'm going to run against all assets, but it will only select assets that have not yet been depreciated to this date. I'm just going to run it against the internal book. It will go by very quickly because there's only the one asset to calculate. It is already done. And now we're going to be looking at posting that asset. I'm going to restrict it to April 2027. Select our specific asset. Or might as well do both assets. Process. When we look at these, you can see the source document. We have additions and depreciation for both the laptop and the server that I had sitting there in purchases, as well as the first month depreciation for each of them. And we can post that through. Quickly builds our GL batch for us. And once we look into the GL batches, we should see both the first one, which I hadn't posted, and FA transaction batch number 2. I have been talking about depreciation transactions and asset addition transactions, but you may have noticed that we didn't actually see a list of those when we went through the asset cards. So how do we see those? In this case, we are looking at an inquiry window, specifically the financial detail inquiry. If you select an asset and select a book, you will come up with a list of fixed asset transactions that have occurred on that asset. In this case, we see our addition. the first month of depreciation that has been posted, and future depreciation that was calculated when we ran the depreciation routine through the end of December. Each of these records is essentially one line in a journal entry, and we can drill into them for more information by clicking on the amount hyperlink here. This brings up the full information on that specific part of a transaction, and it's going to give us asset and book ID, the period that it occurs in, the amount that it occurs for. In here we will see our year, if it's posted to the GL posting date, the GL posting batch. The system date is the date that it was processed on. I was performing this on October 1st, as well as the account that it's going to. In this case, it's going to the computer equipment asset cost account. If we look at one of the depreciation details, we will instead see that it's going to the depreciation expense account. A handy feature of this is that once the GL posting routine has been run, that has included a specific financial detail, a specific transaction, you will have this batch number show up beside each transaction. So in this case, we can see these details were included in the FA transaction 000002 batch. The interesting part of this is that this means, according to the fixed asset subledger, this detail has posted through to the GL. This runs into a problem if someone has come along and deleted this FA transaction batch that was built but not necessarily posted. This just demonstrates the importance of making sure you go into your financial batches after you run the GL posting routine and posting that batch through. That being said, if something goes wrong, if the batch does not build correctly, which sometimes happen if someone closes the GL posting routine window before it has finished building the batch, before the little green progress arrow box at the bottom has filled up fully, you can interrupt it and get a partial GL batch that is of no use to you. In that case, it is possible to fix. We do have to go in and edit some information in the database where we will remove the fact that a detail has been added within a specific batch. Then when you run the GL posting routine again, it will simply re-add that financial detail into the posting. GP also includes a large selection of default reports for the fixed asset module. You can see we briefly took a look at the existence of the projection reports. If you want to see projection information on a range of assets rather than one at a time. We can also have transaction reports where we can see additions, retirements, that sort of thing. Inventory, where you can have a list of your assets. Depreciation, if you want to see a list of depreciation that has been posted by batch or a number of other filters. Comparison, you can actually compare between multiple books which have a different depreciation method per asset. Get an idea of what depreciation expense may look like under a different scenario. And one specific report that I do actually want to take a look at is this fixed asset to general ledger reconciliation in activity reports. What this is going to do, it's going to go through the list of financial details that we were looking at in the inquiry window and summarize them per account. So which account is being hit by which asset in which batch, as well as those that have not posted through to the GL. Allows you to quickly reconcile between the GL accounts, what is actually posted through there, and what is posted there according to the fixed asset subledger. That being said, my preferred method for finding fixed asset information is through SmartList. There are 3 default smart lists that are included with fixed asset. Fixed assets, fixed asset book, and fixed asset purchases. Fixed asset is sort of a compilation of information from the general card, as well as you can pull in information from user data, as well as some of the lease information, insurance information, that sort of thing. Most often people are going to care about the fixed asset book smart list. Here's where you're going to see your depreciation sensitive information, your net book value, your place and service date. You can pull in your depreciation method, averaging convention, anything that can give you a list of the depreciation information per asset. The fixed asset purchase is just a list of purchases. You can see here at the bottom the 2 that we added during this webinar. Now, one thing I like to emphasize with fixed assets smart list reporting is that it's very easy to create custom reports based on the fixed assets tables. They're very easy to link together. Often I will create custom reports for my clients. Something like a comprehensive report that's going to include information from general card, the depreciation information from fixed asset books, the accounts that everything's going to post through, as well as user data specific to a client setup. This is sort of a prototype that I did years ago. I actually, when I started the webinar, was surprised to see this in the test environment still. Another one that I often set up as a custom report is for the financial details. When we're looking at the inquiry financial details, we're looking at one asset at a time. I like to set up a simple custom report that just pulls all of the asset information, all of the financial details, and allows you to sort through them with SmartList search functionality. Our tour of GP's fixed asset module is now complete. Hopefully my demonstration has shown that despite there being a large number of setup windows for the fixed asset module, they all tie together in a logical manner to set up default accounts and depreciation information to roll down to your asset additions. This in turn makes those transactions very simple and very quick, as we saw when we posted transactions through payables and quickly added them to the general card, the book information, and hit save, and that was all it needed, just a few seconds of work. The routines are also very simple. In many cases, you're just simply selecting a target date, a target book, and clicking a depreciate or a posting button. The fixed asset module also provides integration into GP's accounting system. We have the drill back functionality into the purchases module to tie assets through to their originating transaction. We also have that direct link from the general ledger into the fixed asset subledger to tie in our GL journal entries to the actual originating fixed asset transaction. We also see there's a lot of data fields available on assets by default, just on the general card, as well as in user-defined data. And as mentioned, setting up an ad hoc reporting through SmartList is very simple. The tables for the fixed asset module link together very easily, and coming up with something that is customized for each client is not a problem at all.